Welcome back, everybody, to These Aren't the Nerds You're Looking For. Lorenzo, Phan sitting here with
Kevin Hord.
How you doing, man?
Doing well. Had a little glitch
How's your
there.
weekend going? Yeah.
You know, it's a weekend.
We're doing okay. Yeah.
We got some Star Wars Resistance today, so that's a good thing.
Yes. Today we are on episode 16 of Star Wars Resistance. This is The Core Problem.
Yes, sir.
February 17th, 2019. Yeah. Ready? Just hop right in. I'll get into the summary.
Let's do it.
And then we can discuss. So, as always, being that this is a brand new episode, if you have not watched it, again, this is The Core Problem, airing on February 17th, 2019. I will do a full summation here. So
Spoiler warning.
Spoiler. Yep, absolute spoiler alert. So, here we go. The episode starts with Kaz in Yeager's shop trying to build a communication machine to try and contact Poe. The First Order occupation is still in effect. Poe happens to be there. As Kaz's machine does not work anyways. And Poe is about to embark on a mission as given to him by General Organa and needs to swap BB-8 for CB-23. And his mission is to go to Jakku. Kaz quickly briefs Poe on the intel that he does have on the First Order occupation of the Colossus. There is a question as to why the First Order wants the Colossus. Like, there's not enough fuel there as a fueling station. But Kaz notes that it's still the last stop for a potential fleet to be able to refuel as they head into the farther outreaches of the galaxy.
Yeah, the unknown regions, I think.
Unknown regions, yes. The First Order basically is trying to take the Colossus so that the Resistance doesn't have it. Kaz also knows something is happening out in the unknown regions, points out a certain coordinate point on a map, and Poe and Kaz decide to go check it out for themselves so that Leia Organa is not surprised later on by whatever is happening out there. In order to get off the Colossus, Poe and Kaz piggyback on a cargo ship. They are flying the fireball out of there with Poe hanging on the side as it seats only one. Once the cargo ship is clear of the Colossus, they detach and meet up with Poe's X-Wing, which Poe then hops into. They head to the coordinates in the unknown regions, and it appears that the system's sun has disappeared. There are surrounding planetoids, as Kaz describes them. They are decimated. The cores are intact on a lot of them, save for one that has been perfectly cored. Kaz and Poe fly into the cored hole of this planet. So when I say cored, it's been cored out like an apple, basically, like just one straight shot through.
It's like a hole punch through it.
Yes, just straight through. They fly into this hole to check it out. They get caught in a gravity well that sucks them in and through the planet, and the gravity starts doing some wonky things once they get towards the center of it, and it kind of pushes them out the other side, sort of, I think. They basically just end up riding it out rather than trying to fight it. Then once they're on the other side of the planet or planetoid, Kaz picks up a faint signal from a nearby moon, and they head to investigate. They do find a settlement there. They come across an old temple of some sort, and it is riddled with blaster fire. It's very clear that the place was attacked in some form. While they're walking around up to this temple, we get a first-person perspective of what turns out to be a probe droid. It's spying on Poe and Kaz. It's hanging out. While they're hanging out there, Poe does feel that something is watching them, that something else is there. And he steps away from the temple trying to investigate. They do come across this probe droid. The probe droid knocks over Kaz and starts flying away really quickly. It takes a quick pause, and little baby probes pop out of it. The mother probe starts to fly away. BB grabs it with a couple grappling hooks or rope or something. And Kaz starts shooting at the probe, ends up shooting BB-8 by accident, but BB-8's not really harmed or anything, just a couple dings here and there. Kaz does end up shooting this probe after tripping and just getting a lucky shot off that way. And Poe makes quick work of the little baby droids that had popped out of it. There's like 3 or 4 that fly out. But shortly after all the probe droids are taken care of, a bunch of TIEs and Von Reg appear flying down. It appears the probe droid did send out some distress signal of some sort. Kaz and Poe get in their ships, and a quick little chase ensues. Poe and Kaz lead the TIEs into the core of the planetoid. The TIEs do end up crashing into either whatever's floating around in there or the walls of the core or whatever. Von Reg ends up turning around and flying out the other way. We don't really see what happens to him, but we don't see him crash is the important part. Once Poe and Kaz are out of the planet, they end up swapping droids as BB-8 and CB-23 were still in the ships CB-23 was still in the X-Wing, so BB-8 just had to hop in the Fireball. But once they're all clear, they switch the droids in space, basically. So BB-8 heads over to the X-Wing, CB-23 heads over to the Fireball. There's a few words of goodbye said from Kaz to BB-8 and how that he wouldn't be able to have done the things he did on the Colossus without BB-8. And then from there, Poe departs for Leia's mission on Jakku, and Kaz heads back to Castellan. We cut back to Yeager's shop. Tam has a lot of questions as to where Kaz went and how. Kaz then shows back up with CB-23. Tam then has more questions as to where BB-8 went and also how, considering there is a First Order occupation, and therefore how do you go anywhere?
Let's get into all those details later.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying Tam is bringing up these questions nonetheless.
For sure.
So in story mode, Tam is questioning all of this shit. Kaz then also mentions that he will show CB-23 around and walks away. Tam then asks more questions, asks them this time to Yeager. Yeager says it's none of her concern, basically stay out of it, do not worry. Tam freaks out, basically. She gets very angry with this response. She wants to be let in, it seems. We cut outside where Kaz is talking to CB-23. TIEs are flying over. And Kaz notes that what they saw could happen to anyone next, and they could all be in a lot of danger. And from there, we cue fanfare.
Cue fanfare.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, a little bit longer on that one.
That's all right.
There's a lot to get through in this one.
I interrupted you a couple of times, so that's going to stress that one out. But yeah.
It's all good. So, real quick, this one was directed by Saul Ruiz and written by Kevin Burke and Chris Doc Wyatt. The only major addition to our normal cast is Oscar Isaac coming in for Poe Dameron.
Gets his own credit page.
Yep. He gets the and Oscar Isaac as Poe Dameron credit.
Yes, sir.
So, yeah.
Well deserved, I think.
Yes. If we want to start there, I think we've mentioned it before, and it's worth mentioning again.
Sure.
Oscar Isaac, I think, as a voice actor on this show, does a really good job.
Yeah.
He still feels like Poe. He sounds like he wants to be there. It sounds like it's a lot of fun for him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it comes through.
He's grown even more on me from all the way back on The Recruit.
Right.
But, yeah, super solid performance. Well done on his part, you know. I got no complaints at all. So it's good to hear him back. We knew he was going to come back at some point. We had definitely speculated that he would have to come and pick up BB-8, and that's essentially what he's there for. So,
and this does tie in, just to step back into the larger universe. It was mentioned in a Poe Dameron comic last year that Poe was without BB-8 and he was about to go on a mission to Jakku from the comics viewpoint, and he did mention that he had to go pick up BB-8. We didn't really know where. I mean, we could suspect that this is what he was going to go do, but now we're getting the various storylines meeting up here.
Yep, and that was in Poe Dameron number 26, The Awakening Part 1.
Mm-hmm.
So That's where.
Yeah, so it's there. This is what I like about having a story group, kind of making sure things line up, And there are a few things here and there that haven't 100% melded still, but I think the power of a story group is at least somebody's kind of keeping an eye on some of this stuff,
Yeah, this definitely has a bunch of tie-in from The Force Awakens, this show, the comic books. Like, this episode is pretty all-encompassing, like pulling 3 different genres together and kind of filling in little plot details, I guess you could call them, or not even plot details, just little details of things that have been going on,
just
and
other things,
kind of how Poe fits into all this, jumping back and forth between 2 or 3 different types of stories. So my first question for you is, I guess the First Order has all communication on lockdown on the Colossus?
Well, I don't think communication is locked down. It's just being observed.
Okay.
There's no secrecy, right?
So Kaz is trying to build like a secret radio, like a ham radio or something, but
basically,
I feel like I feel like the First Order would be able to pick up on these transmissions anyway.
I also agree with that point. I was curious about how a separate machine was going to bypass, because a signal is going out anyways, and I agree with you 100%. I don't feel that. Yeah, I don't feel communications are locked. They're not. The cargo ships are still coming and going. People are still able to make long distance phone calls. It's just Poe doesn't, or Kaz doesn't want to risk interception from the First Order.
Okay, because later in the episode, when he and Poe are talking, he basically apologizes, saying, "Hey, I haven't put forth too many reports lately. The First Order's been watching over everything. This is why I wasn't able to get a hold of you."
Right.
So it's kind of
Poe understands as soon as he lands. He's like, "Yeah, things have changed clearly."
Next question was Poe there when, like, is that the reason that Yeager kind of grabs his box, turns around, heads inside? I'm guessing Yeager already knew that Poe was there, because Yeager goes up and he's talking to Kaz like, "Yeah, is that supposed to be a radio? You think that thing's gonna work?" And it's only when we pan back a little bit and Poe's already standing there, just like leaning up against the fireball.
I don't think so. There's still some slight shock from Yeager turning around too.
Okay.
There's no indication either way, but I don't think there's any indication that Yeager knew Poe was there.
Okay. Is there anything that we need to cover any more about the pickup of BB-8, other than Poe saying, I got a new mission from Leia. We're headed to Jakku tomorrow. So this is essentially the day before The Force Awakens.
Yes, yeah. So this is basically leading right up to that scene of Poe and I forgot his character's name, but it's Max von Sydow from The Seventh Seal.
Yep.
And it starting with "This will begin to make things right."
Correct.
Which that always tickled me as a first line to start a new trilogy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I know that people have suggested that it is a way of apologizing for the prequel era films.
That's what I personally saw it as, a lampshade, I guess.
Right.
It's not a fourth wall breaking, but it's definitely it's a slight nod of the cap per se.
Yeah, I never saw it that way. And, after hearing about that, I totally get it. And, I guess think of it as you will.
Yeah. Yeah, like, I don't think it makes or breaks or does whatever, to anything, especially now that people have their own opinions on Disney's version of Star Wars, or their take on where the story has gone. Right. So maybe we'll just start episode 9 right in the same spot with the same line. So,
yeah,
depending on
very well
your point of view.
On Jakku, with Poe Dameron and BB-8 beginning in episode 9. I guess we'll see.
Yeah. So no, but I will say I'm shocked that the story is here already in terms of time frame. I'm kind of amazed that sitting here that BB-8 already has to be taken away with still a handful of episodes left for season 1 of Resistance here.
I figured that BB-8 would be collected, and I think we speculated that BB-8 and CB-23 would be flip-flopped, right? And the last time that we saw...
I just assumed it'd be like a season finale sort of thing, you know?
Yeah, I guess so. Again, it wasn't a surprise to me that it happened. It was a surprise to me that it was like, hey, I got to pick up BB-8 because we got to go to Jakku. We got this new mission thing going on.
Mm-hmm.
That surprised me. And we had definitely heard, or it's been revealed or talked about or whatever, that the Resistance show is going to overlap with the sequel era films as far as timeline goes. I didn't think it was going to happen now.
Yeah, I figured like starting with season 2 is maybe when we'd start running concurrently with Force Awakens at the very least, right?
Yeah, and I mean, the timeline of the Force Awakens, maybe a week, right? And then
if that,
and then follow that up immediately with the Last Jedi. A couple of days, I guess. Right. I think based on the number of like sunrises and sunsets on with Luke and Rey during that storyline on Octo, that it's like 3 days or something for the length of the runtime of the film. So we're presumably looking at, by the end of this season, even if each episode is really, really tight on this show, that we're going to be further along in the timeline than the theatrical movies are.
Right, and that's kind of why I was surprised that we would be picking up BB-8 and having him depart this series already.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm just curious how much ground this show will end up covering.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Rebels went for 4 seasons, and I think that's an appropriate amount of time for a show to last. I think, I really enjoyed Rebels, and that show could have gone on for a lot longer. Personally, it had found its stride, but I understood Filoni's need to make sure that it ends
right
on his terms, sort of thing. Right. But now I'm just curious on if we're picking up BB-8 here, and as you said, the sequel trilogy, two films in, does not cover a lot of time.
Not at all.
Yeah. But if we've been spending like weeks on the Colossus here, like,
and there's times where we've speculated that it's weeks in between episodes.
Right.
So presumably the next episode, which is The Disappeared, coming out next week, could take place after The Force Awakens.
Right.
And or after...
Which is a strange thought.
After The Last Jedi. Here's what I think is going to happen, and then I'm going to make one note about timeline as far as the Clone Wars goes, and then we can jump back into the details of this episode. I think that the rest of the episodes for this season are going to be pretty tight as far as the order of events and when things happen, and that potentially we're going to coincide with the wrap up of this season with maybe the wrap up of The Last Jedi.
Last Jedi. Okay.
Right. And then I don't know where that puts us in the future, because nobody knows if there's going to be a time jump or how long the events of Episode 9, because we don't have a title yet or a trailer or anything, like what the time jump from The Last Jedi to Episode 9 is going to be. So I don't want to speculate that Season 2 is going to pick up where Episode 9 does, but it's possible. It'll probably fill some stuff in the middle, because by the time that Season 2 comes out, we will have already seen Episode 9, presumably. Although if If season
I don't
two,
know.
if season 2 of Resistance starts when season 1 does, that means like November. So it's going to be
Right.
before the release of episode 9. But
Yes. This season started in October, even, I believe. So
late October, early
no,
October.
October 7th.
Okay.
October 7th.
Early
Yeah.
October. But we'll probably find out here in a couple of months in April in
Right.
Chicago. So
Yep, in Chicago. That's a very likely spot for that.
at that
all I know
point,
is the show was renewed for a second season, so that is confirmed at the very least.
cool. That's good.
But because there's, because it would be kind of nuts if they just wrapped the season up and that was it. I wouldn't, with where we're at in this episode, I wouldn't feel comfortable with that. But I didn't really quite think outside of how little time has traversed in Force Awakens and Last Jedi until sitting here with you.
And you really don't until you sit down and talk about it. Because even even in the original trilogy back in the OT, each movie presumably is a short time span. Like A New Hope, 3 days,
Something like that.
a
Yeah.
week. Empire, questionable because nobody knows how long Han and crew were on Bespin and or Luke was on Dagobah.
Yes. Yeah.
Return of the Jedi, again, maybe a
Just a
couple of days on Tatooine, and then could be a time space, and then, the final battle stuff on Endor, which,
just a matter of
a couple more
couple
days,
of days.
then.
Yeah.
So, but with those, there's definitely like a time dilation in between where it's like stuff is talked about that, there was things that happened and things developed throughout the galaxy and other stuff was going on. Whereas with the sequel trilogy, boom, boom, back to back so far.
Yeah. Back to back. It's almost like we get that full newsreel pickup, like Clone Wars style, where it's like, hey, like here's where we left off, and here we go.
Right. Last week on.
Yeah. Exactly.
So,
So.
speaking of
Yeah.
Clone Wars, I got one thing to say about that. We're talking about timeline and number of seasons and stuff. When the Clone Wars came out, we were introduced to it by a feature film. Kind of. Right? See episodes, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 6 of this show that came out like a year ago to talk about that. But what I had expected was like movie and then 2 to 3 seasons, then another theatrical release, and then like 2 to 3 seasons, and then like a third theatrical release for the Clone Wars. That's what
you were expecting?
That's what I was expecting.
Why? Like,
Because
after hearing about that first movie, I was like, oh god, this is it. Like, they are never trying this ever again.
Well, because if you think about it, we had the OT, which 3 movies that each came out 3 years apart. Then we had the prequel trilogy, which was 3 movies that came out 3 years apart. And then they announced an animated movie and an animated series. So I was thinking movie, 3 years of shows, movie, 3 years of shows, finale movie to end it.
Here's why. Okay, now we're going to go on a side tangent.
Sure.
Here's why that can never, ever work. Or it has to be done very carefully. Because second movie comes out. Are you assuming everybody has watched every single episode or just the first movie?
Just the first movie. But, like I was saying with the OT, things are talked about that you didn't see. So you know that there was stuff that happened in between A New Hope and Empire. Same can happen in this format.
Okay. Yeah.
Because it's like main thing, other stuff, main thing, other stuff, wrap up.
Yeah. The TV in theater experiment is one I want to succeed. And yet, what annoys me is that everybody does it completely backwards from what I would expect. There's been only one TV show released in theaters that I thought did it very well, and that's Doctor Who's 50th anniversary special in 2013.
I think we talked about this.
Have we talked about this?
I think so.
That one did it well because it was day and date to the hour all around the world. So like New York and California had them playing in theaters at the exact same time, right?
So if it was noon in New York, it was 9 a.m.
It was 9 a.m. here.
Yeah.
Or my friend at home in Michigan was sitting in her apartment getting ready to watch it, and I'm like, oh yeah, I just got to the theater. Also, it was filmed in 3D, and a plot point revolved around it needing to be in 3D, which I thought was fucking brilliant.
Nice.
That's a special event, and I understand charging regular prices for that. Now, like regular theatrical prices, right?
I understand.
Now, the issue is other TV show have come out being charged premium prices because they're like Fathom events or whatever. So I've seen like an episode of Sherlock, like one of the Christmas specials of Sherlock, which was like a fine episode, but it wasn't amazing. But it was, normal theatrical prices. And then Game of Thrones released 2 episodes from the season 6 finale leading up to season 7 being aired on HBO. They released 2 episodes together in IMAX, charged IMAX prices, which is $20 goddamn dollars for an episode that was, by that point, like almost a year old.
Right.
And then the one that like killed it completely was fucking Marvel's Inhumans, released in IMAX a month before the premiere. Charged $20. They filmed it on IMAX cameras, but like they were the digital ones. But because I never fully watched it. I saw enough clips. I saw the presentation at Comic-Con, and the lighting is flat. The lighting is bad. It still looks like a TV show despite being filmed on IMAX cameras, which is just embarrassing. So like, what needs to happen is that like, especially with the last season of Game of Thrones coming out, that is a show that, it's not 100% a match with theatrical film, like special effects and budgets per se. Or maybe this one is. I know HBO is dropping a lot of money on this last season.
It probably will be.
Yes, this season might be the one that meets that bar. But, have every episode run a week in theaters. Don't do like a single screening Fathom event, like I don't want to dedicate exactly like Game of Thrones. I would, but there are going to be exceptions where, the world we live in, I can't always make it at 6:00 on a Sunday night to the theater, so just run them for a week.
Right.
But because they're a TV show, charge cheaper. I'm not saying like you don't have to charge like $2. Like, don't lose money, obviously.
Right. But
like, because you have to split between the studios and the movie theaters,
right,
and that makes sense. But I feel like it's a win-win for everybody if, number one, that show doesn't run with commercials anyways because it's HBO.
Right.
Number two, that's just bonus revenue for all the movie theaters, and people are going to buy popcorn and sodas and whatever.
Right.
Right. So maybe charge like $5 to $8 depending on where you live. Like out here, like 15 is kind of like your going rate. So like,
Yeah, here it's weird because like an actual movie ticket is like, I don't know, say $7.50, right?
Right.
But then most movie theaters have like dedicated seating, so that's like an extra $1.50, and then like if it's not a matinee, then it's like an extra $1 or whatever. So
right. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying, like
going to the movie theater, it's like $13-15 for a movie, just like an average movie ticket.
Right. Yeah, so that's like, just go cheaper for a show that deserves it, something like Game of Thrones. Right. But anyway, so that's kind of my long rant on this TV and theatrical experience I wish would succeed in some form. I feel like that communal experience of watching a massive show like Game of Thrones with dedicated fans, if maybe like Mandalorian, whatever this Loki show coming out for Disney Plus.
Yeah.
Like this sounds like it has some weight behind it in terms of production values, but
yeah, yet to be seen. So I guess we'll
see.
We'll find out that.
But anyways, that's my long side rant there.
I don't think that Resistance is going to make it to the big screen.
No.
But maybe having Christopher Sean do a little cameo in something at some point in time wouldn't be a bad idea. So.
Yeah. But anyways, back to this episode.
Yeah.
I do want to note that I felt that this episode was very brief in the best of ways.
Okay.
It went by very quickly.
Okay.
And it's one of those weird episodes where like nothing happens but a lot is revealed, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And I kind of liked that about this episode.
Okay. I got a few more.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say I got a few more questions for you before we get to our overall thumbs up, thumbs down.
Right.
This escape plan to get the fireball off of the Colossus seems like a terrible idea. They dock on top of this cargo ship, which is gray, and the fireball is like super multicolored, and Poe is just going to hang on to the outside. And then when they have to like drop off the thing, they like detach from it, and Kaz is supposed to like fire up the engines. They fall all the way back down to sea level, and then it finally catches or ignites or starts, or whatever you want to call it, takes off. Poe must have like a grip of steel, and his shoulders must be bionic or something, because there's no reason that he shouldn't have fallen off, and two, if he didn't fall off because for some reason he could Tom Cruise hang onto the side of this fucking thing, that his arm would not be ripped out of its socket. So I guess good for him on that one. But they do this magical maneuver of flying close to the X-Wing, Poe's X-Wing, which I guess CB-23 was just like flying around in, and Poe jumps in. We cut to commercial, at least on my end, and then when we get back, they're in space. They have gotten to this place, this system with no sun, right? Mm-hmm. And then we're talking about coring planets. What did this mean? What is coring a planet? Like, I get the one that has a hole all the way through it, but then Poe is also like, it's not. He says the damage isn't from weapons, right? It's not weaponized damage. This is something else. And then,
because like with the Death Star, what the Death Star did was just completely blow a planet up, right? Like billions of little pieces start flying around,
right, in
its former orbit, right?
Right.
So Poe notes that is not what happened here.
Correct.
Because each of the little planetoids should have been blowed up. What I am presuming here is that this system was the testing grounds for how Starkiller Base would start either destructing planets or absorbing materials and energy out of. So like Starkiller pulls from the sun of a system, but are they also just trying to get other energy from the cores of planets as well?
Yeah, that's what I wasn't quite sure about. I agree with you that this seems like a test site for Starkiller Base, but it was. Yes. I was under the impression that Starkiller Base was not mobile, that the actual weaponization of it travels through hyperspace or something. Like the planet that Starkiller Base is on doesn't move around, right?
I think it does.
Does it?
Because how would they point it at anything?
I know we've talked about this before, and I thought that it used some sort of, I think we talked about this with the Rebels guys, because Mike definitely reads a lot of the new EU and stuff like that. We'll have to look into that. But yeah, so I thought that,
because otherwise, like, you have a pirate ship in the middle of the ocean,
mm-hmm,
and you have to wait for other ships to come to you.
No,
to
because
start
it
a
would be
battle?
like having a pirate ship in the ocean, but being able to shoot the cannon through space-time.
No, that's not how that works.
Okay.
That is 100% not how that works.
Okay.
Because what we see it doing in Force Awakens, it's still physically pointed at whatever the New Republic system is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like,
Mhm.
it's there with it.
Right.
You know, and they see it coming.
Right.
They can't do anything about it. But there's no way then from that physical location would they try and shoot towards, like, Coruscant.
Okay.
Right?
I don't know. That's the way
Like,
that I understood it.
there's no hyperspace for lasers and blaster fire, right?
But
Like,
is there? We're gonna look into this, and we'll come
Right.
back to this at another time. Remind me next time
Mhm.
we see Starkiller Base, and hopefully I will have done my research by that time.
yeah.
But yeah, so I didn't really understand what was going on with the core of these planets, because Poe was like, well, if Cass suggests that the First Order is like using the core for something, but then Poe's like, well, then why are they leaving the core behind? And we have some planetoids that Kaz calls them like cracked open like eggs, and then there's this one with just like a perfect hole bored through the middle of it, and so Poe thinks it's a good idea to fly through this thing, and that turns out not to be a great idea, except for to be able to be used as an escape trajectory later.
Right.
They find this temple thing. Is this like an ex-Jedi temple? Is this a Maz Kanata castle? It's just...
Yeah, I don't think it's a Jedi temple. I think it's just like an old ass regular temple.
Okay.
Right.
So this could be like another group of
Just old religion or
Lurmen
something.
that just like ran away to try to get away from everything, and then
Right.
eventually the First Order found them and blew them up. I'm assuming that the reason this entire thing was destroyed is because they would have been witness to whatever the First Order was doing in this sector anyway.
Definitely. Yeah. Definitely.
Kaz says it would be way easier to search this during daylight, except for Kaz, you
There's no
idiot.
sun.
There is no sun. There is no daylight ever.
Right.
And if actually there was no sun, this from that point until they leave, the entire episode would have been just pitch black because there's no light source.
Right. There's no light anywhere, yeah.
But yeah, so then they have to fight this droid thing. So kind of whatever on that. This is supposed to be like dynamic, I suppose, but it's just kind of like whatever. There's a droid thing. They have to fight it. They do. They succeed. Then we get 3 TIE fighters and Von Reg's TIE fighter, I don't know, advanced X1 or X2 or something. Poe's idea to use the gravity wells in the middle of this cored out planetoid in their favor because they already know how to get through it, I thought was a clever idea. Do you agree?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I thought it was fun, yeah.
Yeah, it was nice. I don't know why Von Reg is here.
Yeah, and I find it interesting that Von Reg does not say a single word. None of the TIE fighters, none of their pilots say any single words to each other, which is odd. I don't know what kind of weird budget cuts are happening at Disney Channel right now.
We don't get the normal like interior cockpit dogfight shots of the
We get
of the ties.
some of them, but yeah, we don't get a lot. We get a shot inside of Von Reg doing some stuff, but we just never hear him speak.
Yeah.
And it's really fucking weird.
I don't...
Because we've heard him talk.
And I feel like if he
know
would
he
have been
can.
there, he would, one, perhaps recognize the fireball. Maybe.
Maybe.
But 2, I think he would be more apt to investigate after the fact. Like, what were these 2 fucking ships? What's going on? Something. Maybe we'll see that in the future. But if you just have, like, 4 random TIE fighters, they all get blowed up inside the core of this planetoid, so be it. You know, then the First Order can be like, oh, well, something happened. We don't know. They could go investigate and be like, okay, they tried to fly through the middle of this thing. They got blowed up. I don't know what's going on. Right. As opposed to having a commander that is like bested by two guerrilla warfare military peoples, right? Enemies, whatever you want to call them, and just kind of gets cut off by a roadblock and says, oh, shucks.
It has to go to the other side of the planet.
And it has to go the other direction. I don't really know. This thing doesn't seem that big anyway, so it seems like, I feel like he could fly out of it and, I don't know, at least maybe get a visual on him. I was trying to do the math on this thing, and it's like, I was looking up how wide an X-Wing is, which I can't find how wide they are, but they're about 12 meters long. Figure they're a little bit less wide than they are long, right? So 10 meters. And then this hole that they're flying through is maybe 5 times as wide.
Yeah, something like that.
So you're looking at like 50 meters. And then that's like 2/3 or like 1/3 the size of like the entire fucking planet, maybe.
Yeah.
You know, so, but like I did the math and I was like, okay, like 1,000 feet? That doesn't seem very big for a planetoid.
Yeah.
Right,
So
when you talk about how Earth is like 24,000 miles in diameter. But anyway, the scale in this whole other sector thing that they go to doesn't really seem to add up, is what my point was. And I suppose that's neither here nor there. Moving past that, we have our droid swap, which I think was supposed to be emotional, but it wasn't really. Like, it kind of was.
I agree. It just kind of happens. Like,
and it's like...
It kind of happens. And it's just partly because, like, we know what happens to BB, you know? And also, we've had this discussion that it's kind of weird that BB-8 was with Kaz to begin with for this. It's weird that, number one, we've had Bucket, who has done nothing, at least from our vantage point of the show.
He's
and
done
now we're
nothing.
being introduced. Yeah. And, you know, we've met CB-23 before, but now she, as Poe points out, so there is fully... We've had this discussion.
This is BB-8's girlfriend.
Droids.
CB-23.
Yeah. So she is now there, and I guess for these last handful of episodes, either we're going to get used to her, or
I guess
she
so.
might die. I don't know. Like,
could be. That would be sad for BB, I guess.
I guess. But yeah, so it's a weird little moment, and I agree. It just kind of happens. I didn't feel a major connection to this moment at all, only because it's one of those, like, yeah, like, this has to happen. And considering the circumstances, I think they did the best they could. There's nothing I would really change about this scene, right? There's nothing I could do to improve the scene. There's nothing, you know, I'm not saying that they did it wrong or they did it poorly.
I honestly thought that when they landed to investigate the temple, that the droid swap was going to happen then. Like, CB was going to go with them, and Poe was going to be like, BB, hop in my X-Wing, make sure everything's ready to go. And then when we would get to this point, then it would be, Poe would be like, all right, deuces, I got to go, which is basically what he does. They swap droids, and then he's like, okay, I'm out of here. And he just goes because he's got his mission. He knows what he needs to do. And then Kaz at that point would have like a solo emotional reprieve or whatever, right? That's kind of the way that I saw things happening.
Yeah, you can't have a goodbye scene like after BB has left, if that makes sense, right?
That's basically what we get. I mean, Poe's like, so they swap droids, and then Poe's like, okay, I gotta get out of here and get on this mission for Leia, man. I'm gonna have a lot of stuff to tell her. And Kaz is like, hey, one question real quick. How do I get back to the Colossus? And Poe's just like, CB20
knows.
Yeah, CB knows, like, so it's good. And he's like, okay, cool, see ya. And
But Kaz still is able to say bye while BB is there. Does that make sense?
But doesn't he say goodbye to Poe after Poe takes off? And he's like, bye, Poe. I'll hope I see you again.
Sort of, but it's still, to me, I saw this as like almost like a Fast and Furious 7 moment with Paul Walker riding off.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but that only works if you have Vin Diesel next to him. You know what I mean? Like,
so Groot.
Yeah, you need Vin Diesel to still be there to say bye, right? Like you can't just have Paul Walker riding off in the sunset by himself, right? You know, it's like having Frodo just walk on the ship and then like not telling anybody, and that's the end of the movie. You know,
the first ending, or the second, or the third, or the fourth?
The second to last ending.
Right.
So that's how I feel about that. So
yeah.
So yeah, like I said, it's fine. It's there. It just happens. It's also because again, we know what happens to BB, so there hasn't been enough build up between these two characters, Kaz and BB-8.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if this series had been a lot stronger for a lot longer leading up to this, I maybe we would have felt differently.
Okay.
It's just because, to me, we've had 12 meandering episodes, per se, right? And then, like, finally we get into kind of a core story of the greater universe at play, rather than Yeager's brother or finding out how racers live on the Colossus, blah, 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 right? Like, these aren't Kaz and BB-8 heavy stories.
Or Rucklin.
Yeah, Rucklin. Yeah, like, these aren't Kaz and BB-8 heavy stories. So when we get to this point, like, yes, they have been through stuff together, but it seems serendipitous that Kaz has made it this far as a spy.
Fair enough.
Right.
By the way, I don't think that I heard any mention of the word spy in this episode.
Thank goodness, yeah.
Surprisingly. Let's push back down to the Colossus and talk about the reunion of Kaz with the rest of Yeager's crew and the introduction of CB-23 and Tam and Niku and Yeager. So,
yeah. I think I said it last week. I could be wrong. I might have said something else, but I think I was not a fan of Tam in the last week's episode, and that only continues here.
Okay.
Like, I find her very annoying now.
Okay.
Because of how at the end of this episode she asks logical questions, but then the conclusion she is kind of drawing in the absence of answers bothers me, because she in the previous episode has been talking. She's a first order sympathizer, right? Like, let's just be upfront about that,
right?
And then she has a lot of questions about what Kaz is doing, and Yeager and Kaz, knowing that she's a first order sympathizer, clearly don't want to tell her shit. You know, like, they let her in on shit last week, and she starts freaking out and is like, we got to turn ourselves in. You know, like, who are these kids? Blah, blah, blah. So Yeager and Kaz are like, stay out of it. Like, we don't want you included in this. And then her response is like, well, like, you guys don't let me in your club. Like, why won't you guys tell me? I feel like I would be understanding if you guys told me. And Yeager is just like, no, like, this doesn't concern you. And then she walks off angry, but I'm like...
See, I was actually like... I understood where she was coming from and, like, why she was saying the things that she was saying. Like, I thought that Kaz had a decent cover story, like, BB-8's broken, I had to go get him repaired. But then when he throws out, like, I took him to Takodana, like, no, like, you're You went one step too far and you made it unbelievable, and now you have to make up another lie, right?
I don't disagree with you there.
And
yes, yeah.
So then when Tam is like, hey, I want to understand, all you got to do is tell me, I didn't like Yeager's response. He was basically like, you're a dumb little girl and you're not old enough or mature enough to understand.
No, I'm with Yeager on this based on last week's performance out of Tam. Like, out of all the bitching she did last week, all of the weird misunderstand. I get she didn't have the full picture still, but the fact that Kaz was willing to help the two children of Tehar hide a stormtrooper and go with that, but meanwhile Tam is the one like still trying to kowtow to the First Order and shit like that. I think Yeager's response is deserved. You know,
I just feel like from Yeager, like I don't know, and I don't want to know, and I don't care, just fucking work on the ship, would have been less attention drawing to himself, because he's basically saying, yes, I know what's going on, but no, I'm not going to tell you.
But I think that needs to happen, though, because it's even worse if Kaz keeps disappearing and Yeager just goes, I don't know. Like, you're the fucking manager. Like, why isn't this employee showing up for work? I get Tam's point on that.
Okay.
I understand that Tam is like, why isn't Kaz here working on the ship? I think it's appropriate of Yeager to say, look, he's got his own things going on, and I approve of it.
Okay.
Right? Like, I am running this shit. Let Kaz do his thing. I know that he's not here working, but I am not against that.
Okay.
Right?
And
like, I like the solidarity.
I am down for that as well. It's just the verbiage of the way that he said what he said to her. He might as well have said, in my opinion, he might as well have been like, look, we got our own fucking side gig going on here that you can't be a part of because you'll fucking ruin everything.
I think,
I feel like he
revealed
too much information by saying what he said.
Sort of, but I honestly would have been fine with him saying that to Tam. Again, with all the bullshit she's been saying, I just need if a full shutdown. Like, Yeager shuts her down to some degree, but like that, what you said there, if Yeager had said that, and that's a full shutdown, I'm all for that shit, because Tam is like on my fucking nerves right now. Like, I'm not gonna lie. I've been like, I will admit this is a personal mood of mine. This trope of having characters outside of main character circles.
Okay.
And then either being introduced to it or, misunderstandings that get turned upside down sort of thing, or redemption stories for certain characters.
Okay.
This is a trope that happens, so not in Star Wars specifically, but there's other TV shows that do it, like bullying, like shows involving bullies where the bully turns out to be like, bullied by his father and he's also gay and a single mother sort of shit, right?
Right.
I'm sick and tired of those. No, I don't want a redemption of the fucking bully. I want the bully to fall into a volcano and fucking die. Okay?
Right, because he's an asshole.
Right. I don't want redemption for these asshole characters. I want them to go to prison or get fucked up, punched in the face, whatever. And Tam is on that shit list for me right now.
So Tam is the Biff of the Back to the Resistance universe?
Completely. Yes, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, so I don't need a fucking turnaround on Biff here. I need to see Biff waxing a fucking car, okay?
Right.
So
I get you.
This is where Tam is sitting for me right now.
Where does that put Niku? Because Nico used to be your least liked character on this show.
Niku remains unliked, but Niku never tried to insert himself per se, right? So like, he's not, his I let me word this as carefully as I can.
Sure.
He, in my opinion, is a bad character for the show. He is not a bad character of personality, if that makes sense. Whereas I think Tam is a fucking North Vietnam communist sympathizer, right?
Okay.
Whereas, like, at least with Niku, he's just like, I'm just living my life, and this is what I'm gonna do. And then, like, when somebody tells him like bad shit's happening, he has never gone like, well, maybe we're just misunderstanding, the Viet Cong here.
Which is hilarious because he does not understand a lot just because of the way that he perceives the world around him. Like the Niku joke that we got in this episode. He's got 2 lines, I think, and one of them is a Niku joke where he says, "Yes, Kaz, where did you come from?" And I don't mean in the biological sense. I mean, like, where did you come from right now?
Yeah. And yeah, so there's a certain innocence to that is different than Tam actively trying to fuck shit up is what Tam is doing. Right. So I don't like Niku personally on this show, but in no ways does he deserve to like die a fiery death.
Right.
Whereas Tam keeps trying to insert herself in shit that the moment she will be inserted, as we saw her last week, get inserted into situations, fuck shit up for everybody, right?
Well, not only that, but then when she inserts herself, and then when she gets the grander scope of what's going on, she's like, I don't want to be a part of this.
Right.
Like, you invited yourself along. You're
right.
You're your own fucking problem right now.
And Kaz warned her. Kaz, like, straight up was like, do not come along with this because it's not going to be good. Mm-hmm. And Tam is like, no. Like, I need to know what you guys are up to. And then turns around and starts, like, throwing a hissy fit, Right. But it's like, bitch, nobody invited you.
We actually told you not to come along.
Right. So it's one of the, like, it's like 5 people are in a car and, like, you tell your girlfriend, you're like, no, we are gonna go golfing. You are not gonna like this. And she's like, no, but I want to try and understand what it is you like to do with your time. And then she's just standing on each and every single fucking hole complaining about the sun, right?
Because it's hot.
Like, that's Tam to me in a fucking nutshell, right? She's that person that's like, I don't know why you find this fun. This isn't fun. Can we go home? It's like, we're on hole 2, bitch.
We are 1/9 of the way through this thing.
Right. We told you would not have fun. This is on you. We are not changing the fucking plans. And in no way is this based on any real experiences I've ever had in real life.
Interesting. I've got one more observation for this episode before we give our final judgment on this thing.
Yes.
At the very end, when Kaz is talking to CB23, he looks out and there's a bunch of cloud coverage. Mm-hmm. 2 or 3 of these clouds are like triangular in shape, and then they have like a little, almost what looks like a spire coming off the top. To me, this looked like a couple of Star Destroyers out there as just like an ominous, like, hey, this is, foreshadowing of things to come.
I didn't catch that.
So go back and look at it's like the last 30 seconds of the actual episode before it gets to credits. And there's definitely 1 or 2, if not 3, clouds that look pretty similar to Star Destroyers.
Yeah, because what I was catching more was that it was clearly a separate, like, matte painting, and not like a full CG creation. Or maybe if it was a CG creation, it was like painted in a computer is what that means, rather than CG models in the way Kaz and the other characters and the Colossus all are.
I know that they use like digital matte paintings for backgrounds and even like environmental textures on the Clone Wars. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's exactly what's going on here.
Yeah, that's what it looked like to me. I mean, not in a bad way. Like, it was a well done matte painting, if that's in fact how they did that. I didn't catch the shapes that you're noting here, so I'll have to take another look.
Yeah, I don't know if I can do a screen grab or not. I may try to do that. But let's get to thumbs up, thumbs down, and then one-word evaluation of these episodes, or one-word review, and then any speculation you've got moving forward. So what do you give this one?
I will give this a thumbs up.
All right.
I like this one. It moves quickly. We get to, sorry for the pun, but the core problem here.
Right.
The core plot line finally comes to play here. And, we've had some build up the last handful of episodes, thankfully. So, I think I've been saying this for the last handful of episodes. Like, this is what the show needed to be from the start, was like one serialized adventure, with the arc that keeps building. And the fact that this one butts right up to the films is fun. I don't think it's necessary, like, it's not good or bad per se. Like with the previous episodes, First Order Occupation, Doza Dilemma, like, they're movie adjacent, but not like, hey, we're going to Jakku after this tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's fine. But I'm just glad that we kind of have a fuller picture via one plot line and not Adventures with Rucklin. So,
yeah, I agree with you. So, do you have a one-word review in mind here?
No.
I can tell you earlier you called it brief, and I can tell you earlier you called it something else that I meant to write down and I forgot. But you can think about that. I'm giving this a thumbs up as well. I called this one detailed because, as you mentioned earlier, even though there's not a lot that happens, there's a lot of information given.
Right, yeah.
Which I think is nice. We don't have a long, drawn-out story of all this shit that's going down. It's basically like, Kaz is here. He's picking up BB-8. That's why he's there. Sorry, Poe is there to pick up BB-8. Kaz is like, hey, this is what I stole this thing. This is what's going on. And Poe's like, well, let's go check it out. Then we get some other information via what is happening in the episode as opposed to details by plot. It's details by proxy, if anything. So
yeah, brief is good. I like brief.
Okay.
It's a brief. Yeah, it's a brief episode, and which is odd to say because they're all like,
these are all exactly 22 minutes and 3 seconds long.
Right. But yeah, as you said, like the plot isn't overstuffed. Things progress very naturally on this episode, which I liked a lot. And again, Oscar Isaac does a really good job. I really like the character model they put on him. It's one of those shows where, even though it's a very cartoony style, with Poe and like Phasma here, in the show overall, like I can see this fitting in to some degree with the bigger universe, now that we're to this point, especially, right? But sometimes like with the comics and stuff, you're like, the art style is so just different, yeah, that you're trying to meld them in your head.
It's harder to make the match there,
right? I'm not even gonna lie, like, even between like prequel and original trilogy, just based on usage of green screen and computer graphics and stuff with the prequel trilogy, sometimes my mind does have a disconnect that Ewan McGregor and Alec Guinness are one and the same character, but like those two universes feel so different to me.
Yeah.
That there's rare times where like, this is very random and again not widespread thing, but before Force Awakens came out, Disney put together like a clip package. Because what Disneyland will often do is they'll put together like a special sneak peek with like a 5-10 minute scene, and they'll put it in like one of the theater things because, you know, people can only watch Captain EO or Honey, I Shrunk the Audience so many times, and then they have to like refresh that shit. You know?
Right.
And that sort of entertainment is kind of going out of vogue because they realize like people can only watch a movie so many times when they revisit, you know. Like, it's different than going on a roller coaster. It's like, oh, we get to watch a 10-minute thing we've seen before already, right?
Right.
So with Force Awakens being Force Awakens, they couldn't really give anything away, so they just put together like here's all 6 episodes wrapped up in a 10-minute clip montage. And rather than going episode 1 through 6 chronologically, they had it hop around. So like they would focus on like everything Obi-Wan did. And they did it where like they would play Alec Guinness voiceover over Ewan McGregor footage. And that really helped solidify in my mind. I was like, oh shit, that's right. This is one massive storyline. And then it led into like the second trailer, right? But yeah, so like that said, Resistance, with the addition of Poe and Oscar Isaac's zeal in his performance, helps me accept like, oh yeah, like this sounds like, because it is him. Like there's sometimes reading the books even where the voices of characters don't quite sound like them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do.
You know. So there's like the one book with like Baze and Chirrut that did really well in that regard, where like it sounded like them. You know, those characters sounded like them. But other books where I'm like, that doesn't really sound like a thing Leia would say, you know?
I've come across this with about every Indiana Jones comic book I've ever read.
Surely, yeah.
But do you want to make any predictions or anything for next week's episode that disappeared before we jump out of here?
Nah, because I feel like we were pretty off the mark on this one. I think the only thing I said that was even close was that it would be a physical core problem on the planet of Castellan.
Yeah, and that didn't end up being the case.
No, but there were core issues happening on other planets. They were literally getting cored.
Very true. I'm going to here's my prediction. The disappeared is referring to some characters that we've met in the show, and they're gonna be bringing back the children from Tehar, and we've got something going on with them.
That would be my only guess there. But do you think it's going to be the children of Tehar specific, or do you think there's going to be other people throughout the greater galaxy that have disappeared? Or is it referring to the temple people? Or all of the above?
I am sticking with the children.
Okay. Yeah.
So, I guess we will find out next week. So until then, let us know who you think the disappeared might be. Hit me up on Twitter @NotTheNerds, or Lorenzo over on Facebook @NotTheNerdsPodcast. Shoot us an email, nottheNerdsPodcast@gmail.com. Shouts out to Kevin for doing the artwork for the show. You can hit him up on Twitter @TheyCallMeKdub. And thanks to Lindsay over at StrangeFantasyMusic@gmail.com. I think that's all we got. Do you got anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Yeah, I think we got another new subscriber on YouTube, so that's cool. So reach out to us. Identify yourself.
Yeah. Show's available on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn. Audio goes up on YouTube. Wherever you're listening, please comment, like, subscribe, all that goodness.
Yeah, tell a friend. So next week is The Disappeared. Oh,
yep.
If you made it this far, Wednesday is a Clone Wars episode, and we got Ralph from Cake Boss on, so
all right,
check that one out. But yeah, until next week, I've been Kevin.
Lorenzo here.
These aren't the nerds you're looking for.
Well, bye.